Crazy like Jack Bauer. His name is Forrest Power. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, YouTube. So I think that it's pretty fair to say at this point that COVID-19 and the entire pandemic is pretty much the major incident of our lifetime. Certainly if you're in the category like myself of being kind of 35, 36 or under, there has been nothing more significant than the pandemic over the past kind of year and a half now, I suppose. I realise that lots of people have talked about COVID-19 and the pandemic, and the focus of this video is not necessarily the disease but more the reaction to it. But as I reflect on the impact of the pandemic, it's crazy really. I never thought that I would have to teach a load of kids online through my computer for months on end, and in actual fact me and one of my close friends actually joked about this concept only a couple of months prior and said that this was like 10-20 years in the future, and it almost seems like the future has come home to roost already. Now the focus of this video is a slightly off-centre one, but I don't want people thinking that this is some kind of mad conspiracy nut videos, because Lord knows we've seen enough of those on like Twitter and Facebook over the past year. But what I do want to talk about really is the reaction to this pandemic. There's a very famous saying in politics, and that saying is, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think that yes, this pandemic has been horrendous and it's killed hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people worldwide, but I do kind of question some of the decisions made by people in terms of thinking, how can we manipulate humanity, off the back of this horrendous incident for our own personal gain. That's the nature of human beings really. We react to things and we're very selfish within our thinking, and I've got no doubt in my mind that greater minds than myself have actually sat down, plotted and planned how they want to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic in a better place for their life situation than they were previously. In terms of my own personal experiences with COVID, working in a school environment for an extended period of time, it was pretty much a given that at some point down the line I was going to contract COVID, and lo and behold, in October of last year I tested positive for the disease. But I'm not going to kind of sit here guys and make this into some kind of sob story about me battling through disease. I'll level with you and say that I had it quite mild really. I had one really bad day where I had a tremendous fever and I was sweating, it was horrible, but other than that I was a little bit shaky. I lost my sense of smell for probably the best part of a month, and I had a bit of a fever, but I managed to kind of cope by isolating myself and watching, strangely enough because it was Halloween, the Saw films one by one. I literally watched one Saw film every day for like a week. And that was my kind of way of coping with COVID-19. I remember one particular incident because obviously I was like ordering out for food, leaving instructions for people to leave stuff on the doorstep. I ordered out for a pizza with explicit instructions to, leave the pizza, and obviously I'd paid by card online. And to my horror one day, I opened the door and this lady was still stood there some like 2 or 3 minutes later after knocking with this pizza in her hand, and at that point, I kind of ushered her off my doorstep as if she was some kind of leper. She probably thought I was totally rude, but I just didn't want to endanger somebody by potentially kind of passing on this disease to them. So I guess the first question that I'd like to pose today, guys, is that if you did have COVID, what was your experience of it? Because obviously, through the media we see some of the horror stories about people being hospitalised. One of my close friends, his mum actually died from it, which was really, really tragic. But I'd love to know, like, if you did have COVID, how severe was it, and what was your experience of it, full stop, really. But moreover, like I said, the focus of this commentary, I don't want it to be solely on COVID, the disease. I want to talk about, like, the reaction to it. So it first came to my attention that certain places were using the pandemic to usher in a certain way of working. When I turned up to my local Burger King and I offered them a £5 note, and they told me that they weren't accepting any cash payments and they would only let me pay via card, and that's still something that they are doing even today. So, like, I rolled up to Burger King a couple of weeks ago and I was told, no, we are only accepting cards. And that made me think about the concept of, like, a cashless society being ushered in by the powers that be. Why? Well, I think it's pretty obvious why kind of governments and corporations would want there to be a cashless society, and it's basically because obviously it's better for tax. A lot of jobs are paid cash in hand in this country and obviously all over the world, and the government never sees any of that tax. So for that reason, in terms of a selfish money-making scheme, if the world suddenly turned cashless, that would definitely suit the agenda of governments across the world. And I do think that we were moving towards something like that anyway, but as I say, never let a good crisis go to waste. It's pretty much accelerated the progress of things like cashless societies. You look at some of the major corporations though, and they have done really, really well out of the pandemic. I like to talk about, like, the kind of grasp and sphere of control that Amazon has now got all across the world. Amazon has done so well out of this pandemic in terms of its stock price, in terms of people that didn't used to rely on online retailing now turning to that as the kind of primary medium. Myself, I was very guilty of, ordering loads of stuff off Amazon just to kind of cheer myself up through the lonely, dark times. There's nothing quite like having a parcel arrive at your front door and there being a little bit of mystery about what it is. So Amazon done very, very well out of that. In contrast though, lots of smaller local businesses have had to cease trading, because they've just not been able to cope with the lack of revenue that's been coming through the door because of the pandemic. These major corporations that are bankrolled in the millions and billions have got, like, money to burn basically. Whereas, Joe Bloggs, who owns a little corner shop at the end of your street, if he doesn't see any money rolling in for a week or two, that's definitely going to harm his potential to keep his business going. And I think it's really sad to see some of the smaller local businesses, and I'm thinking about pubs and places like that near me, that have had to stop trading. Now, that makes me think about whether or not backhanders have gone in from the mega rich to world governments to maintain this status quo of the rich continuing to be rich. It's a great situation if you are like an Amazon.com and you see local businesses folding left, right and centre, because you know that those people that used to send their custom to those shops, it's now a greater chance that they're going to turn to you. And so, would it be beyond the realms of possibility, that major corporations have exploited this pandemic for their own personal gain? Listen, guys, we know how humanity works, and unfortunately, the history of the human race is also the history of human beings being devious and underhanded, and I definitely wouldn't put it past certain people in positions of power to manipulate a situation in that way, really. Another thing that's popped up off the back of COVID is this possibility of vaccination passports that have been talked about. This idea that you have to inject something into your body to travel abroad. Now, I have had my first vaccine. I actually had it last week. And if I'm really honest about it, it was as much to kind of pacify my mum as my own belief in any vaccine. I'm of the belief that my immune system tackled COVID, and my understanding of science is that once your immune system deals with something, it becomes more efficient the next time at dealing with it again. So I was a little bit skeptical about the vaccination, but I was persuaded to get it to basically kind of, please my parents. But like now, with most of the vulnerable population of the UK vaccinated, we are still talking about lockdowns over here and banning foreign travel and not opening the country back up. I think I subscribe to the theory that people have had this vaccination, a lot of people, as a goodwill gesture to say, listen, I'll do my bit so that we can open the country back up and we can go back to normal life. And then even when you look at the concept of lockdowns, you've got to question, how much they've worked, how effective have lockdowns been across the world. And I think these are, questions that are going to have to be kind of mulled over by greater minds than myself and thought about and reflected on. Now, listen, what I'm not saying is that I doubt that there has been a pandemic, and I know that conspiracy theorists around the world talk about whether there is actually a virus or not, but I don't doubt that this thing has been killing people. What I do question, though, like I say, is humanity is manipulative in its nature, and how much of this is COVID and how much of it is human manipulation. I think the sad truth of it is that, we won't probably find out the bottom of what's gone on in its entirety, and even the origins of this disease are clouded. Lots of people talking about whether it came out of that lab in Wuhan. Obviously, the message that's been propagated around the world is that it originated from someone eating a bat in a wet market in China. But the most frightening aspect of this pandemic to me has not necessarily been the disease itself, but moreover the misinformation that's been spread by social media, by politicians, by leading world figures, that has just left the general public not knowing what to believe, not knowing what to invest in. And even though, I have talked about kind of conspiracy nuts going off on crazy rants, I kind of don't blame them really, because who knows what to believe anymore. The truth has been kind of suppressed and buried and kind of merged between lies and facts, and it's a scary time for the human race because, with the birth of the internet, so many kind of different articles are written by so many different people that have you believe in one thing, and then you can read something the next day and it completely can change your viewpoint. It's crazy, really. So yeah, there are my thoughts, guys, and I'd love to know what you think about all this. How much of what's gone on can be attributed to this disease, and how much is because of people manipulating a bad situation for their own gain. One of my favourite TV shows has always been The X-Files, and I believe that Mulder and Scully would have an absolute field day in investigating all this and uncovering the truth. But I do question whether or not the vast majority of the people on this planet will ever get to the bottom of this crisis. So yeah, that's it, guys. Let me know your thoughts on the COVID-19 pandemic, but more kind of precisely than that, let me know how much of all this can be attributed to the actual disease, and how much do you think that people have manipulated a bad situation for their own gain. Never let a good crisis go to waste. There you go, guys. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you've not done so already, please feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about it, tell your grandchildren about it if you so wish. I'm Forrest Power, and this has definitely been emotional.